technical analysis with the 3 black crows candlestick pattern, which should ideally have 3 large red real-bodied candles with little to no upper and lower wicks. There should also be gaps between the real bodies of the candles, and it's always preferable to have noticeably higher selling volume during the pattern. Though in reality, it's possible for these features to not all be present together during large short-term drops. In this case, there's a candle with a much smaller real body than the rest. It also overlaps the real body ranges of the candles before and after it, though this overlap is quite small, and the upper and lower wicks are relatively balanced in terms of them being even in length with each other. So essentially representing indecision like a spinning top or doji. In contrast, this next candle has more overlap with the real bodies, and its upper wick is significantly longer to be closer to an inverted hammer. Overall, these features do detract slightly from the bearish sentiment from this section, which is still an overwhelmingly strong drop with mostly intact 3 black crows candlestick pattern characteristics. Here's a clear bearish reversal with a hanging man and a bearish shooting star candle that leads to a steady drop, but it's not overwhelmingly strong because there's constant overlap between the real bodies of the red candles, and selling volume is just average or even slightly below average. Also, even though the wicks are relatively short, they're not even and balanced, with the lower wick often being longer than the upper wick. To add that element of a bull hammer or even dragonfly doji, where the longer lower wick compared to the upper wick demonstrates some degree of weakness in maintaining lower prices. Sometimes there can simply be sharper, small to medium-sized drops that aren't directly related to the 3 black crows pattern, since they often have a mix of red and green candles with overlap and varying proportions with the real bodies and wicks. Though there will often be at least one large red real-bodied candle with little to no upper or lower wick that can often cover a large portion of the range price drops. Here's an extreme drop with almost all 3 black crows characteristics, except some of them have longer lower wicks. Other than that, it's ideal 3 black crows price action with more than 3 candles in this case, returning back down to this major support area in line with the clear bullish engulfing pattern. It's not too surprising to see a major deceleration in falling price, even though there's a situation with close to ideal conditions for the 3 black crows pattern. Within this $1 range, price is neutral to bearish since it mostly closes within the lower half of the range. Sentiment leans more bearish now with consecutive closes under 29 along with a noticeable spike in selling volume upon crossing under 29. In the broader context, there's actually been a large-scale bearish continuation similar to 3 methods falling price action. Now we'll take a look at similar kinds of drops, where overall it's still a 3 black crows pattern, with the only major discrepancy being a candle or candles that are essentially bullhammer candles within the row of falling candles that will still often be red. Like with other examples, the chart now drops into well-defined support, where there is a minor delay and a few candles with longer lower wicks prior to the main event, with the 3 black crows pattern, which is a near perfect scenario from a bearish perspective to quickly close under a well-defined support area. A range forms with the lower boundary holding at around $3. But like in a previous example, things are neutral to bearish, with closing prices mostly in the lower half of this range. Selling soon picks up again, and there's distinct 3 black crows price action characteristics. But selling isn't as strong as it could be because of plenty of overlap in the price ranges of the real bodies, due in large part to the well-defined support at the $3 boundary, where it's not too surprising to see the formation of the current dragonfly doji. Just a temporary pause at support before the fall resumes again, and it's a similar scenario. Bearish sentiment is present, but selling isn't as strong as it could be. with significant overlap of the real bodies of the two candles that have just closed under $3. So price does maintain closing under $3 as it enters into a more neutral to bearish phase, until this formation briefly breaking lower to essentially produce 3 black crows price action over the course of 2 large red real-bodied candles, resulting in a small short-term bearish continuation. Price does rebound, but it doesn't stay to establish over the $3 boundary. And soon there's a row of red candles with only a brief bull hammer pausing back at 255 before the decisive gap down. And even after that, bearish sentiment is still relatively strong, but even though there's still essentially 3 black crows price action, selling is getting exhausted in the short term, and there will of course be more overlap between the candles, which is a precursor to this current period of indecision with flatter movement that's often seen after such a sharp short-term drop. Now within this relatively range-bound movement, there's a downswing with large red real-bodied candles, but it's mixed in with green candles, and there's relatively high overlap between the candles. So it's certainly not 3 black crows price action, whereas this downswing of relatively the same size is much closer. All it's missing for a more ideal 3 black crows pattern is to have more distinct gaps between the real bodies. Even though this is a much larger drop, the only thing it really has in common with the 3 black crows pattern is the larger red real-bodied candles, which this downswing also has, in addition to forming a row of red candles that even have some more noticeable gaps between the real bodies, to produce a sharper short-term drop more commonly associated with 3 black crows price action. However, as we've seen before, strong selling cannot be maintained for an indefinite period, and soon after there will be flatter movement as price reaches a well-defined support area, this time around 130, which is still under consistent selling pressure, especially as 3 black crows price action has begun to advance lower into this support range, now extending down to 120. Where there's actually an immediate break below 120 as soon as it's recontacted. This strongly sustained bearish sentiment mixes 3 black crows and 3 methods falling price action together, meaning it's not uncommon to see 3 black crows price action forming the first and or third portions of 3 methods falling patterns.